All right, so good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Once again, I'd like to feel, as Jorge said, I'm a big energy guy. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I know it's a small group of us, but again, if it's 1 or 1,000, what I'm called to do today, I'm going to make it work because I think it's a mission that I have to do. And I'm glad that you guys are here in 157 to receive the message. So if you actually look on your agenda, this is 157, and this really talks about unmasking some of the emotions. And when I started reaching out to Coach Rice, we were in correspondence together. He said, well, what's the title for this presentation? And I thought, what could be a title for a presentation that I know I'm here today and I'm talking to primarily men and primarily men of color. There's certainly some young ladies, and thank you for being here as well, because I think it's important to have women supporting the men in what we talk about. But I think it's really important that we understand, as men of color, black and brown men, the importance of unmasking emotions. So when he said, Rashad, what's the title of your presentation? I'm a big Jay-Z fan. And Jay-Z has this line, and it says, you can't heal what you don't reveal. And I thought, I don't want to steal his line. And I came up with can't heal from the hidden. Can't heal from the hidden. And let me just very quickly tell you who I am and what I do. So I'm Rashad Bowtie Mills. Yes, the bow tie is a part of the branding. Man, I started wearing bow ties years ago when I was a teacher assistant, and it just caught on the kids with, Mr. Mills, you look different. And I was like, man, I like this feel. And so it kind of separated me from a lot of speakers, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. And when we traditionally think about therapists, we normally think about like older white men wearing bow ties. So that was my like funny spin as a younger black guy in the therapeutic space wearing bow ties. And so by day, I'm again licensed clinical professional counselor for a practice called Hopeful Counseling, which one of my dear sisters, Dr. Stevens, has. And I'm not too familiar with this neck of the woods, but it's in Lanham, and I'm not sure, is Lanham close to here? Is it far? I don't know. Who knows? But I think it's generally in the area, right? And so that's what I do. I am a professional speaker. Father of two girls, twins, so please pray for me. They entered 9th grade, so I've been saying a lot of prayers that the boys hold off, and I do a lot of play-by-play announcing for local high school sports in Baltimore. I'm a former sports broadcaster, but most importantly, for today's purpose, I'm a therapist, and I'm a black man as a therapist, and more importantly, I'm a black man that I've gone through emotional challenges. I've gone through a lot of emotional challenges in my life. And for the people that just got settled, it's so incredibly relevant and important that Coach Rice, in the beginning, he said he wanted you to carry around your mask. And I had no idea, absolutely no idea that he was going to say that. And I had some masks just, around my house. And I said, this is what I'm going to bring today. And we talk about unmasking emotions. So I want everybody just for a moment, if you can do it and it's not necessarily discomforting. It doesn't provide a great level of discomfort. I want you to put on your mask. I want you to put on your mask. And as you put on this mask, I want you to tell me, what do you notice now that this mask is on? 30 seconds ago, you didn't have this mask on. What's the difference? What do you experience? And I want this to be very interactive. Let's talk. What do you feel? Just yell it out. Silent. I like that one, Rue.
Like the restrictive form of communication.
A restrictive form of communication. I love those two. Malcolm.
I was going to say enclosed.
Enclosed. I like that one. Right here. Junior.
I feel like I can't read other people.
You say you feel like you can't?
Can't read other people.
Can't read other people. I love what I'm getting so far. Gentleman in the back. And what's your name? Sean.
Covered up.
Covered up. Right here in the back. Hidden. I like that.
Got a lot of breath coming back in my own phrase instead of voice.
Breath coming back. So it's sort of the reverse flow. So when we think of, we normally breathing out and then we breathe in. But when this, it sort of changes that, that direction or that trajectory. Now we're breathing in. Take your mask off. It's a different feel. And what we have experienced as people in general, but particularly black and brown people, right? We have a sister in the room, but a lot of us as men, that's what's happening and has happened. And I think COVID was one of the greatest emotional things for us. Why? It forced us to understand that we've been putting on masks before we actually put on a mask. We've been hiding. We've been hiding from emotions that have been really damaging to us as people, as men. And it's this idea of emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? It's best you know it. Now, I don't need a clinical definition, whatever you have, Malcolm.
I guess knowing how to control your emotions.
I love it. Knowing how to control your emotions. Junior.
A good understanding of your emotional, I was going to say capabilities.
I like it. You can start right there. Great answer. Good understanding of your emotional capabilities.
Sharing empathy with others.
Oh, you must have been in my notes. You must have been stealing from my notes. Sharing empathy with others. Rue.
Being able to express your emotions in a like safe way.
Being able to express your emotions in a safe way. Here's a definition of emotional intelligence. Is to be able to understand and manage your own emotions, yet being able to understand the emotion of others. So being able to understand and manage your very own emotions, but being able to understand the emotions of others. In that definition, the latter part of that definition, I did not say being able to understand and manage the emotions of others. I just said understand. I didn't say manage. Why didn't I include that in? Junior.
Because you can't really manage someone else's.
Yeah, I can't manage Junior's emotions. I don't know what Junior experienced emotionally last night or this morning just to arrive in traffic. I have no idea what Malcolm's morning looked like and his emotional temperature to arrive here. I have no idea what Sean's emotional temperature was just making the transition from the building that we were in to this building. I have no idea what that looks like. However, I can understand, right? So there are 4 central components to emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. Self-awareness. I need to be able to understand my own motives, thoughts, and actions. That's self-awareness. I need to be able to understand why I do things, why I say things, and why I have the emotional temperature, the emotional makeup that I have. That's self-awareness. That's self-awareness in a nutshell. All of these domains or principles that I'll share today, 4 of them, all of them are very critical in nature. But I think that the foundation is self-awareness. If I don't understand self, then it's really hard for me to understand anything else. And I'm a very, very candid person. I'm a very candid speaker, even when I'm talking about mental health. For years, I lacked self-awareness, even as a therapist. There were decisions that I made throughout the course of my life, going to school, Johns Hopkins University, this prestigious university, and I am lacking in emotional intelligence myself because I wasn't self-aware. I would do things and say things, and I would later look back and say, Rashad, how in the heck did you arrive there? Because I wasn't self-aware. We have to be self-aware in order to understand the world around us, right? This self-awareness helps us understand needs. What do we need? What are we challenged with? Where are our strengths? Self-awareness helps us take a deeper dive into these things, a much deeper dive into these things. And if I'm going to be very honest with you, I've worked in jails and prisons as a part of what I've done as a therapist. Certainly when I was still in school, part of my practice, I worked in a women's facility in Jessup, which is in Maryland, and I worked at the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center for about 4 or 5 years, working with young guys, 18 years, but they were charged with adult crimes. So technically, they're juveniles, but they were charged with adult crimes. And one of the things that I would often see while I was working with these young brothers, it was a lack of self-awareness. Literally, they would tell me they committed some of the most heinous crimes, and I would ask, what were you thinking? And they said, well, Mr. Mills, I really wasn't. I really wasn't. I mean, one of them always stands out in mind, a young guy, he was 17, and I gravitated towards him because he had twins at 17. And again, I told you guys, I have twins, and I just had this connection with him. And he told me that he literally shot somebody in the head. And as I began to try to understand his line of thinking, because I'm never a believer of the action, I always want to know what's the underlying thought, right, that drives the actions. There's something therapeutically, it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm not going to turn this into a therapy session, but it makes this correlation between how we think to how we feel and how we behave. And when I was working with him, I said, well, man, what's the thought that was driving this? He said, I didn't think. He literally shot somebody in the head in broad daylight. And it was, I don't know if you guys know, in certain, more challenging neighborhoods, they have blue lights, right, in certain neighborhoods. And this was a blue light, and literally there was like a police sort of mobile unit set up right in this community that he lived in. And I said, you never put two and two together that the blue light was there, and you had like a mobile police unit like right on the corner. He said, no, I never put those two things together. And he got caught because he didn't change his clothes. He walked in the house, ate, smoked some marijuana, and then the next morning he came right back out with the very same clothes on. And I said, you didn't even think about changing your clothes? He said, no, Mr. Mills, that didn't register in my mind. Self-awareness. Self-awareness of thought, right? Self-awareness of action. Self-awareness of repercussion. Consequences. These are all things that are connected to this element of self-awareness. How do we become more self-aware? This is sort of a byproduct. I want you guys to think about this. We become more self-aware by asking ourselves questions. Asking ourselves questions. Potentially seeking valued opinion. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then, this might be scary, actually going to see a therapist. Actually saying, you know what, I don't like the way I feel. I don't like how this thought was generated. Maybe I need to go ask somebody, is this normal? So the first thing in emotional intelligence is self-awareness. The second thing is self-regulation or self-management. Self-regulation or self-management. Can I actually manage the emotions that I'm dealing with? Think about how many people we know, and I want you to think specifically and with a level of intentionality, how many black males you know that struggle with regulating emotions, managing emotions. When they are faced with adversity, falling back to what I call a default level of thinking. When we're faced with challenges, you know what we normally do? We fall back to a default level of thinking. That default level of thinking is normally unhealthy in nature. We fall back to what we know. It's often said we fall back to the level of our training. Mental training. You guys are students in college, correct?
Yes.
You're faced with adversity. Financial aid may be a challenge. Maybe you live an hour away from the school. You're driving back and forth to the campus. Maybe you're under intense academic stress. Maybe there's pressure from family, friends. Maybe some of you have adult responsibilities, right? Sean, can I share? This brother said he has another baby on the way. And congratulations again. Fatherhood is the only hood that I'm claiming now. It's wonderful. Adult responsibilities. Maybe some of you are married. Maybe some of you are in relationships. Maybe your relationship is rocky. Maybe some of you are thinking ahead. What am I going to do when this thing called college ends and I quote unquote, I have to go into the real world? I have to manage all these emotions. Got to manage all these emotions. Now, just a show of hands. You don't have to actually say it. Just a show of hands. Everything that I talked about, these real world experiences, post-college and post-academics, how many of you guys are actually thinking about these things now, or you can see yourself thinking about one of them as a potential challenge? Right? 100%. And you know why? These are real things. These are things that we have to be able to manage and regulate. That's where emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence says that whatever I am faced with at that time, there's always a way, cognitively, based on thought and emotion, that they can work out. Emotionally, it's never as gloomy as it actually seems when you understand the concept of emotional intelligence. How do I manage these emotions? How do I regulate them? And I want to, again, make this very interactive. What are some ways that we can manage and regulate our emotions? Let's talk. Junior.
Well, one way I kind of deal with it is kind of just box breathing in, breathing out, really being intentional with your breath. Like small thing that can kind of, regulate some intense emotions that I have.
I love it. So we talk about, we call breath work in the world of therapy. So breathing, right? Breathing technique. Isn't it interesting? Now, all of you guys are in college. And when you were in elementary school, I can assure you maybe 95% of you at some point, a teacher, an administrator, when you were frazzled, you were upset, or you came home and you just couldn't get multiplication right. And mom or dad or some caretaker said, just breathe. It's the same principles when we're older. Sometimes the connection from the first grade version of yourself, how we handle stress and how we cope, breath work, breathing. Remember, they always told you, take a deep breath, right? Slows down the central nervous system. So the same principles actually apply. What else? What are some ways that we actually cope, Sean?
Feeling comfortable to talk to somebody else.
Feeling comfortable to talk to somebody else. So it's interesting, my brother Jorge is coming in. And man, thank you again. That presentation was rich. Yeah, it was rich. I follow you on social media via ET, and I've known Coach Rice for a while. That was rich, really rich in nature, really rich in nature. So what else? What are some ways that we cope?
I use exercise as a way.
Exercise. Does that sound familiar? The brother just talked about exercise is a healthy coping skill. So when we talk about managing emotions or regulating emotions, we have to find these healthy ways to cope. So we talk about breath work. We talked about exercise. What else? Writing, journaling. It's a release of something, right? How many of you guys love hip hop? Hip hop just celebrated their 50. Yeah, I love hip hop. What is hip hop for a lot of people? It's a release of emotion. I put the pen to the paper, unless you're Jay-Z and you don't write at all, and I'm able to release. It's cathartic. It's therapeutic in nature for a lot of people, right? So what was my first 4 principles of emotional intelligence? What was the first one?
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness. What was my second one?
Self-management.
Self-management, self-regulation. How do we regulate very difficult emotions? And one of the things, Jorge, is I was listening to the presentation, and I was going to ask the question, but I wanted the young brothers to have the forum to actually ask, is how did you cope, right? How did you cope with that? So we talking about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence can, if we're not careful, be altered after trauma. How do we rebound after we've gone through a traumatic experience? It would have been very easy for this brother to revert back to some unhealthy coping skills, right? My body is changed as I know it, right? Mentally, there's some changes that not just him, we all will undergo in life, but how do I rebound from those? And I'm engaging in healthy cognitions. And you know why this, yes, go ahead.
I wanted to speak on that. You basically saying like how to rebound. And me personally, this whole year, I've changed my whole like personality mentality. That I got to be more familiar with myself. I was always.
Let me stop you. Sorry, I'm not being rude. I want to cut you off respectfully. How did you get more familiar with yourself? I love that.
Took a lot of time for myself. This year I had a lot more time for myself, so I just began to think on what was causing the issues I was dealing with, like processing my feelings and how to deal with it. Like me coping, like I used to play the game music, but like I work now, so I just listen to music stuff like that. So like during those times, I just think on like how, like if I come against something, I think on how the issue could be resolved or like how it made me feel, like, and that makes me like reflect on how to treat people when I like triggers. I got rid of a lot of triggers.
Are you a therapist? I'm just having fun, man. You're using some therapeutic terms. I like to have fun. So he said triggers and processing. Thank you. Great answer. So he talked about getting to know himself. Triggers. Part of emotional intelligence is understanding what triggers us. All of us have something that triggers us. Let's think about a gun. What happens? This whole process starts. The bullet is fired. It's a trigger. So we have, think about this. When we are emotionally unintelligent, there's something that triggers us that we don't understand what that actual trigger was. And this is so incredibly important for us to understand as people, but as men and men of color. The world treats us differently when we're not emotionally well. The legal system, and I don't mean to veer off topic, the legal system treats us differently when we're not emotionally well. In academic institutions, they treat us differently when we're not well. So we do have to present in a different way. We do. That's just the reality of it, right? And so going back to it, number one, we have to be My first one was, I forgot that fast, jeez. Self-awareness, self-awareness, self-regulation. And here's my third principle. The third principle is social awareness. Social awareness. What is social awareness? What do you guys think? Social awareness.
I think having like social awareness is having the ability to read the room.
Stop. Great answer. Have the ability to read the room. Social awareness. How do I show up in social settings? Let's take the first portion of that. Social. All of us are on social media. I find it very interesting when somebody makes a social media post and it's like 55,000 comments and 50,000 are way off base. It's no education. There's no information in what their response to it. Why? They're not socially aware. It's all driven from emotion. We have to be social aware. Social aware how we show up in different rooms. I'm going to drive this point, guys, down your throat until it's tattooed on you. We have to be very aware how we show up socially as men of color. Even with education, we got to show up in a different way. I'm very, very intentional about how I show up in spaces. When I come to speak, I'm always going to arrive at least 1 hour early, bare minimum. I was 1 hour and 15 minutes today, but who's counting? I'm always going to be early. I'm always going to shake every hand. You guys, when you walked in the room, I shook every hand. I'm very intentional about that. When people ask me how I am, I always say the word exceptional. You why? It stands out. It changes. It's not a normal thing. He said exceptional. I'm always going to say that because why? I'm very careful about how I show up in spaces. Because I understand that I am a black man. I understand this. Even a highly educated man. But I'm very aware socially how I'm showing up. We got to be very careful. This emotional intelligence is how not just we showing up in our spaces, but in the much bigger, broader spaces. The world is literally ours. It's ours. But we have to understand how we show up in these spaces. The world is ours for the taking in a good way. But we got to understand how we show up in certain spaces. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to be your authentic self. I want you to be your true self. Jorge said it best. He said, man, I rock hats and J's when I show up. I rock Nikes and Jordans, but I like bow ties. And in a moment of candor, I love tattoos, by the way. And, seeing clients virtually, I'm working on a sleeve now and all of it is meaningful, Bible verses, all of this stuff. And I was being disingenuous. I would cover up my, man, what if they know you got tattoos? I'm like, this is who I am. I understand who I am, that I'm a black man born and raised in Baltimore. I've been shot. So when I read your story yesterday, I've been shot. The bullet almost tore my leg off because I wanted to, as the term is, jump off the porch. And I kind of joke now. I thought I was Tupac. And when the bullet hit me, it was like, no, God, we're not going to do this. I'm not thugging. Nope. Redirect me. I battled alcoholism. My branding now on social media is called Happy Hour. I just put the positive spin on the negative thing. Every Friday morning at 5 a.m., I drop a message. But 8 years ago, every Friday at 5 p.m., I was somebody's happy hour throwing back shots of Hennessy because I didn't have the emotional intelligence that when life hit me, when I went through breakups, my world would crumble. Oh, my God, she left me. And I was a train wreck. I found myself in a mental institution, even while I was a licensed clinical professional counselor. And I'm looking around and I'm reading the room and I'm saying, you can't be serious. I'm helping people by day, but I had a breakdown and I'm with the people that I'm supposed to help. True story. I can't make this up. So we have to be aware, right? How we show up socially. Have to be aware how we show up socially. And a part of the social awareness is sometimes we view ourselves in a very myopic lens. A very myopic lens. It's much deeper than just what's here. It's how other people view us as well. When people would say, Rashad, you're arrogant, your ego. No way. What are you guys seeing? And then people would constantly tell me this. And I had to do what? I had to put my ego aside and I had to open up my world that there's opportunity for me to grow emotionally. I'm going to get to you in 1 second. There's this idea of feedback. As people, not just as men, but a lot of us as men, I won't say everybody because that's a definitive statement, but a lot of us, we aren't receptive to feedback. That's a sign of a low, emotionally intelligent man. when we can't be receptive to feedback. The reason why that I stayed in alcoholism for years, because I thought in my own limited way of thinking, cognitively challenged, no, I'm just a social drinker. I just like to have fun with the homies. No, it was problematic. Everything that I lost in my life that was very meaningful was a result of alcohol. Sports broadcast in Oregon for 2 years, lost that job, was at a DUI. And I walk around with a hideous scar on my face as a reminder of what I lost because I wasn't emotionally intelligent, right? So we got to be very careful that socially we can receive feedback. Now, here's the thing. Everybody's not qualified to give you feedback, right? It's a saying. I think Coach Kendall Ficklin, you probably know Kendall Ficklin, my former business and speaking coach, said a lot of people give you constructive feedback or constructive criticism and they never constructed anything. So you got to be really careful who's giving you feedback, right? You have to trust that individual to give you feedback. Junior and then Sean, I want to come to you.
I actually wanted to talk about, like, you talked about at my office lens. I wanted to talk about maybe like on the opposite spectrum with people who maybe deal with some sort of anxiety, like focusing on themselves a lot more, the spotlight effect, I think. That's what it's called, where they think a lot of people are really like focusing on what they're doing. Mm-hmm. That's probably not the case. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of talked about anxiety very briefly. Anxiety is what? Let's get a quick definition. What is anxiety?
Stress.
Is anxiety futuristic in nature or is it sort of a past thought?
Futuristic.
It's futuristic. So the definition I give to my clients, anxiety is literally trying to get off the exit on a highway and you're not even in a car. That's the definition that I give. They say, oh, Rashad, I get it. So you're trying to engage and deal with something that you haven't been presented with that challenge. That's anxiety 101. How do we combat it? The thoughts. I start asking myself questions a lot. I question, like I'm on my own therapist. I literally have a therapist, but every day I play the role of a therapist in my brain when I'm feeling anxious. I'll give you a really quick example of how my anxiety, just making sure I got time, how my anxiety kicked up. So Coach Rice, I said, man, I'm walking over to the building. I want to get set up. My anxiety says, Rashad, be prepared at all costs. Things will happen. That's what my anxiety says. He says, come back so we can get a picture with Jorge. And as I'm walking back, my anxiety says, I'm literally thinking about this door being open, me setting up my camera and my tripod, how many people are going to come in, managing my time so I don't go over. I'm thinking of this as I'm walking back to the building. And I just had a conversation with myself. Rashad, what's the worst that can happen? That you can arrive in the room the same time as the people that are going to listen to you. Will you be okay? Yeah, you'll be okay. And as I walked back into the building, the anxiety went from here to here. And I want you to think about it. Most of us function with some kind of challenging thoughts. So the job is, it's not to eradicate the thoughts, it's to bring it to a functioning level. Manageable. I like it. Manageable. Can I function with this throughout the course of the day? Because if it's here, now that anxiety is leading me to a place that there's physical symptoms that are a byproduct of it. We make a lot of bad decisions as a result of what? Anxiety being here for a sustained period of time. Give me 1 second. I want to go to Sean. No, you had a hand up.
Talk about just like social awareness, and I don't know if it's really a question, maybe just a comment, but so you, like, I just say for myself, right? So I might, if I'm in a group with like just knowing, or if a person has like a background that they may not be, acceptable with, you know what I mean? Like, and then you in a group of maybe 90, let's say, Caucasians, that has no idea, about that background you come from, you get judged for that, like at times. So I guess what I'm saying is like you all, maybe just hearing you speak, you all speak like you just moving with confidence, like I'm just being myself, like that you just saying like that's acceptable.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. Moving with confidence. And Kendall Ficklin said this, and I love Kendall so much. He actually said that when I walk in the room, I want to be so confident that the ground shakes. That's what your confidence has to be like. You have to be you in every environment.
But I think that comes with the character you go behind that confidence.
Yeah.
Because being yourself, before you be yourself, what is like, sometimes we're being ourselves. There was at one point that I was always being myself, but there was an end. So just kind of identifying, and I think that's what the brother's talking
Yeah.
what that is.
Yeah. So you always have to be yourself. And one of the interesting things, and you kind of mentioned it, is that, and I want to word it very carefully, sometimes we're operating in spaces and we're doing things and we think that we're being ourselves, but we're not. We're being a facade. It's a facade. This version that I've been able to walk in probably the last 10 years is really myself. When I was selling drugs, counterfeit money, I mean, anything imaginable you can think of, that wasn't the version of me. I always tell people, man, I'm a corny black dude. That's what I tell people. Like, at my core, that's who I am. But all the other stuff, that was a facade because I wasn't comfortable who I was. And socially, I had to show up different. And that's why this other thing that was connected, this drinking, it gave me this character, this liquid courage that I could be, like, I could be Tupac. And that really wasn't who I was. If I could be honest, when I got shot, I had a gun in my hand. I dropped my gun and ran. So you know I wasn't a thug. Like, I'm just going to be honest. And when I look back at it, I joke with some of my friends now, and he was like, man, you really weren't thugging. I was like, thank God I wasn't, because I would have turned and fired. And I wouldn't be here. So it's understanding who you are. And when you talked about sitting with yourself and processing it, that's magical. That's emotionally intelligent. Give me 1 second. When you can sit with yourself and understand who you truly are and be comfortable in it. And it's not these big magical things. Sometimes it's small things that we're hiding. I give you one, and this is just incredible. We know Stephen A. Smith, right? The incredible personality on ESPN. I had the Stephen A. Smith hairline working. I did. It was like here, and I had one wave left, and I was trying to save it. And my friends would give me the blues, like any hairline joke you can think about, especially when I was a sports broadcaster. They would give me the business. Man, you must be Stephen A. Smith's love child. And you know one of the greatest gifts that I gave myself this past summer? You know one of the greatest gifts? I shaved my head. It was a bald head. True story. I immediately put up a social media post. I said, I'm walking in my true self. Because for years, I would wear hats. And the hats had to match the shirt. And it was all a facade. Because I didn't want you to see that my hairline was receiving. And now, every time I go shave, it's like an event. I got music playing in my house. It's like an event. I put a hot towel in the microwave and steam is coming from my head. It's like an event. And it was like something so small was very transformative because I was hiding from that. Who are you? So the name of this was Unmasking the Emotions. Who are you? Can we start taking off the anxiety and show up? Can we start taking off the depression and show up? Can we start taking off generational trauma and hurt? Can we start taking these off and show up in different spaces as our true, authentic self? Can we start peeling back layers of what others thought we should be? Can we start taking off the emotions and showing up as the truest version of ourselves? I think it was Junior that he talked about when the question before some of you guys came in, what do you notice when you put on the mask and then you take it off? I can breathe easier. Why? Because this is restricted. It's very light in weight, but it's heavy. And even when some of us post-pandemic have taken off the mask full time, we're still wearing them. Who are you? And Coach Rice mentioned this earlier. Who are you at your core? Not what you do, not titles. Who are you? Have we tapped into the truest form of us as men emotionally? Have you tapped into, man, it's okay to cry. The last time I had to cry last year was magical. Like one of the snotty-nosed ones, too. It's like it was magical. Who are we? Are we afraid to be emotional? Do we know how to be emotional? Are we running from emotions? Who are we? Because all of us at one point, pre-pandemic, certainly during the pandemic and post-pandemic, we were wearing a mask. And the mask was emotions, right? So I want to get to my last point. So what was my first one? My first principle. Self-awareness. What was my second principle? Self-regulation. My third principle? Social awareness.